Hello everybody. At our church meeting on Sunday the 25th of July, we started to look at what our future church would look like given all the things that have affected us with COVID. And I presented a vision statement which needed to be explained quite slowly and which needs to be seen not as a switch but as a process through which we must travel as a church over the next few months. There are some challenging questions to ask, but there are also some great opportunities ahead of us as well. But we must go together in this, for we are God's people, and this is his church, and the mission is for his kingdom. So let me take you through the story about how we must live to change the world. So here we are trying to discover God's vision for Carter's Lane Baptist Church. And today, as I said, is a starting point. What does our COVID-affected church actually look like? Taking stock, if you like, of where we are. We've been doing that individually for a while, but we need to do it collectively as well, to ask where we are as a church together. The current worship and mission of the church has been continuing in new ways, and I think we have sustained a lot of stuff that we want to do, and we do it well, particularly our prayer life, because WhatsApp has enabled us to work not week by week, but day by day, as we've shared concerns for prayer. We look at our current buildings, and that includes the church, the hall and the manse, and they're not in a bad state, but there's possibly work that needs to be done there. We have seen a decline in activities because of COVID, and understandably some people are a little fearful about coming back to things, but that is changing slowly. The one problem we do have is this ticking time bomb that's underneath us. That diagram there demonstrates the question in terms of the age makeup of our church. If you go to midnight, which is just about here, all this area around here to the end of the yellow bit, all that are people over the age of 50. Looking at it with another diagram, that bar chart shows you what the distribution is, and the most significant number of people who are active in church life are between 70 and 79. Brilliant that people realise that retirement isn't an option in the Christian faith, but it also does illustrate that we have a challenge, and whilst I don't want to stress it, maybe we have got to acknowledge that that picture could look very different in 5 years' time. So that was so we've got to so far, but carrying on, we've found tremendous resilience in counteracting COVID, which is brilliant. Our finance, well, at present, as our treasurer will tell you, we are okay. In terms of income, we don't have quite enough to support a full-time minister, but because of our reserves, that's not an issue. And of course, at present, because I'm part-time, that is okay. And we have resources, particularly human resources. Some people have brought wonderful skills to the life of the church. And of course, we have our building resources. But I have to say this as well, that maybe we are too dependent on our old faithfuls. I pulled Phil Turley's leg about this, and I want him to go on for another 100 years, but I don't think he will. And we have to ask who is going to step in to take people's places over the next few years. But I do believe that if we take stock properly, we are ready to move forward. This tree is lovely. All sorts of people on it. And if you have a look at the different people, you can ask a couple of questions. Which of those people is me? And which of them are people in our church? I wonder, if you look around, are you at the number 20 at the top? Quite comfortable. Or are you number 1, hanging on grimly? I don't think we've got anybody number 5, enjoying the sunshine, letting everybody else do the work. And I think a lot of us may feel like number 2, supporting those who need support to get up. Maybe some of us are feeling a bit on the edge. Number 13 is feeling a bit stuck out on his own. Number 21, who's been in the church obviously a long time, is feeling sidelined maybe. Number 8, well, he's still in the church, but he's given up and is looking away. But there are plenty of others. There's number 14 who is struggling, but number 19 is there to help. Let me leave that up for a moment because I do think it's a fascinating diagram. And where are we and where do we need to be is a good question for us all. What will our church look like? Let's go to the future now, taking stock. Well, we need to have a fresh vision, and I think that means a refreshed sense of worship and mission, that things will have to change because times have changed. We also have to believe that it is God's will that we are seeking. That's fundamental. We've also got to understand that mission is not an optional extra. It's not something to do when we think we've got time. And fundamental to it, and this is something that I believe very firmly, is a belief that God loves us and loves our world. God loves you is a question I've often asked. So what are you going to do about it? Well, this love of God is not just exclusively for us, but a love to be shared with his world. And we are to be the channels of that love. So, what's the future church going to look like? I've got 2 questions actually. The first one is what? I think it's got to be inclusive by age, race, sexuality, ability, gender. Nobody should feel separated. Nobody should be excluded. Nobody should be left out. I also think we should be a welcoming church. And I say that with a little bit of caution. We're very good at welcoming people. But it's not just once. Welcome is not an action, but an attitude that we show. I sometimes wonder, when we have coffee after services, do we always make a point of looking out for others, or are we perhaps catching up with the news with our friends? Social awareness is a key part of our church's life, and we do lots of things already. The food bank is an obvious example. Supporting a bakery in Tanzania in the past is true, as we've supported the liver unit now and have supported sunflowers for those who encounter the pain that suicide brings. But maybe we've got to do a bit more as well. Some of us write to MPs to ask, why is there injustice still? Why is there poverty still? And I think that's part of what the church should be. The worship and witness of the church is crucial as well. And interestingly, I wouldn't want to be in a church that worships but doesn't witness. But similarly, I think we can't just be a church that witnesses unless our worship is in spirit and truth. Both go together. I've often said to people that I don't believe I'm a vicar. Sometimes people ask if that's what I do outside the church, and I say, well, yeah, sort of. But I'm a Baptist, and I'm not comfortable with the more hierarchical situation. I mean, the Church of England, it's got its archbishops, and its bishops, and then its vicars, and then readers, and curates, and then the hoi polloi, and it's top down. We believe as Baptists in congregational government that every single person can bring something of the mind of Christ. So that means we need to be listening to each other. But it also means that we need to be, well, bold enough to say what we feel as well, and not just leave it to everybody else. And we also need, in a future church, to make sure it is future-proofed. One of the ways in which we do it is making sure that people who have roles in the church have deputies who in time will be happy to take on board. Sometimes in a church you get a job and it's a job for life, and other people might find it difficult because they don't want to tread on toes, but some people may feel, well, how can I get out of this because I've been doing it such a long time and it needs fresh eyes. So future-proofing, it's personnel, but it's also making sure that all the physical stuff we do in a building, that we can make sure that that is easy to maintain as well. I think it's a bit like the fact that I'm interested as I get older in raised flower beds, so I future-proof my back. The second question about the future church is how, and we're doing this by starting on September the 12th, a recommitment of members and leaders. We're saying it's a service that's going to be called Here I Am. picking up what the prophet Isaiah said in response to God saying, "Who will go for us? Who will I send? Here I am." And we need to renew that commitment. We need to renew our worship and prayer life to make sure that we make it a priority, because that helps make sense. It's the lifeblood of what we do. We're not just a religious club, a little society, but we are worshippers of the true God. I think we've got to reassess our financial priorities, and I do highlight the manse there because our current manse actually is more of a drain on resources, both in terms of time and in terms of money. And worse, we anticipate that in the next few years it could cost us rather more. Interesting question, do we still need a manse? Some churches have dispensed with that because ministers have their own property and instead they pay a housing allowance to the minister. And certainly manses aren't always appropriate for an incoming minister. One might be a family with not just children but with dependents living there. But another minister might be someone who lives on their own. And would the same building always be suitable for both? Some churches actually nowadays rent property, and that makes it much more adaptable. But of course you can't get rid of the manse without asking the serious economic questions. That it is an investment, and we certainly wouldn't get anything like the return in if you just put it into a bank. So if we're going to use the financial resource, we're going to have to use it creatively, not just put it on one side. I think we've got to keep on improving internal and external communications. The website does a lot and we know it can do more. We've done a lot with social media. We've done a lot with Phil sending out regular updates. We're leafleting our area when we have special events. We need to make sure that people know what's going on, and I think we're working on that one, but we've got to keep on improving it. Part of that is when we recognise that we are not just a church run by ministers and deacons, but we are a priesthood of all believers. We have congregational government, as we say. And so a future church will be effective if everybody shares that vision. That means that we will be able to strengthen the diaconate. As some of you will know, we are short of deacons at present, and we need to bring in more. And it may be that something that we have done occasionally we'll have to do more often, that we might invite somebody to attend a couple of deacons' meetings, maybe for part of it, who bring a specialism that we need to think about. We also need to strengthen the church's strategy group to develop the practicalities of our vision. This has been running actually for 3 years or so, and started off with a 5-year plan, but then COVID got in the way. But I think now is the time for it to be revitalised, and we're looking for new people to share in getting the planning going. The vision, and I'll come back to what the vision actually is in a summary form in a moment, but the vision must be shared by all the groups in the life of the church, by 6-5 Special, by the over 50s, by the brigades, by the toddlers groups, by youth group, by all the different parts of the church, that it's asking how does it share God's love, not just how does it keep itself going. I think we've probably got to look at refurbishing the premises. We have got rooms that are starting to look a bit tired, and they're not especially attractive, and there are things that need to be done. We are already spending money on sorting out some major roofing difficulties, and that'll be great because that'll stop ingress of water and so on. But the other question, of course, is the church building itself. At present it's used for 40 minutes a week, and maybe we've got to look at other ways in which we can use that space. I think personally it's a potential for a concert venue for choirs to practice, for stuff like that. We may have to reorganise it a bit, but I don't think it's right that it's used so little. And then the other big question for the future church is that at present we have a part-time minister, And maybe we're going to have to do two things. Look at sessional youth workers who can come in and support our youth work, not just to do the youth work, but to train adults in youth work. And also, in course of time, maybe to employ a youth minister. Possibly a youth minister in training who has this church as their base, so that it would be a two-way thing. What sort of timescales are we looking for this future church? Well, it actually started on the 19th of July when the deacons set the ball rolling at a meeting when they looked at a presentation of this vision. And then on Sunday, the 25th of July, the Sunday just gone for this recording, we shared the story at church meeting. And I've mentioned already the Here I Am commitment service on the 12th of September. At that meeting, we're going to be inviting people to complete this form here. And it talked about the seeds that we could be sowing. Challenging others about personal faith might be one seed. Nailing our colours to the mast in terms of becoming a church member. To develop an active social conscience about justice and equality. To look for people sowing seeds of being volunteers for the important range of church activities. To find ways of encouraging one another, to re-establish a sense of belonging, particularly with those who grew up in our church, to look at the personal resources, the practical, the writing, the finance, the befriending skills, which I think others will see more clearly than we do sometimes, and faithful prayer. And as well as that, what other seeds do we need to be sowing? What seed packets do we need to have? Now, copies of this paper are available in church, they've been shared online, and I would like you to complete it and fill it in with where you believe you can commit yourself for the next few months. And either let me have it beforehand or bring it to the church on the service at the 12th of September. So those are the first few things we looked at. On the 20th of September, we actually have the next church meeting, and that will be a Monday evening. And we're going to reflect on vision ideas that matter across the age range, because young and old matter. Having talked about a youth minister, I don't think that that's the exclusive area, although we have seen that that's the area which perhaps does need to be grown. On the 18th of October, we're going to have a church meeting with only one item on the agenda, because we need to discuss the future of the manse. At present, the manse costs a lot in terms of time and money. But what should we do in the future? And I have to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what the right thing is. I've got an idea, but I think we've got to consider a way ahead. I think one of the major issues that does concern me is that in 5 years' time we might have to close our church and yet still have nearly £500,000 in assets. During October and November, the strategy and the deacons groups will be working on the practicalities of this, so that in November we have a church meeting to see how much further we've gone on with our vision ideas, but we'll also then have a vote about the manse. There will be no vote on the 18th of October, but we need to have a paper vote, and it has to be a substantial majority. So 2/3 majority. I don't want a Brexit. I don't want to see a church split. That is not healthy for us at all. In spring 22, maybe that's when we start having sessional workers working with our youth organisations, and maybe September 22, we will have a youth minister who works with us. Again, I have no idea if that will come to be, but that's a suggested timetable to which we could work. And also during 2022, I think we've got to have a group of people looking very carefully at refurbishment. I will stay well out of that. You only got to have 4 or 5 people to discuss paint colours, and we'll have 30 shades of red. I'm not going to worry about that, but seriously, it's something we do need to look at. We've been pretty good over the years, but the time has come to do some significant refurbishment. So, in summary, thank you for staying with me so far. God loves us, so what are we going to do about it? We need a church vision that's developed by every one of us. All of us matter, all of us are important. we have to recognise and be honest about it that there are challenges ahead. Phil has talked about drastic questions that we must face, and we must face together. But we do believe that God has a plan. And if he does, then it would seem we have a future. And that's what we seek to find through this vision. Hope you like that little presentation. We have to think outside our comfort zone box. Perhaps we've got to think of doing things in ways that will be different, in ways that occasionally might seem uncomfortable. Very, very important to see these challenges. But the final thing is God loves us, so what are we going to do about it? Well, here's what I suggest. That we be channels of his love. Because in the end, I think that's what our vision must be. It's not changed in 2,000 years. And it's time to renew it for us. Because we must live to change the world. God bless you.